Now, we have been waving the banner a little bit for Kemi Badenoch here because she does have a very clear moral compass. You kind of know what she's going to say. The issue, though, is that she's just nowhere near as high profile or as well known enough as, say, Rishi Sunak and Liz Truss, is she?
Yeah, it's an absolute shame. Like, personally, I've spoken to many young Conservatives, and Kemi is the light that we need. But it seems like she doesn't have a chance of becoming the next Prime Minister, which is a shame because I think she's the only possible outcome that will lead us to another election victory. But, you know, with the party and with other MPs, it seems like it'll be Rishi Sunak and probably either Penny or Liz. So,
And none of them are hardly very well known. They've only been known, you know, a few years.
Rishi's well known, isn't he? Because he gave us all
3 or 4 years.
He gave us all a few grand, or at least a few of us. He didn't give me any money.
No.
But Rishi Sunak, now, he should be tainted, shouldn't he, with that fixed penalty charge? And his resignation note said, oh, this will probably be the last cabinet post I ever hold. And here he is, out in front. Is he a shoo-in?
Well, I think every criticism to be made about Johnson can be made just as equally to Rishi Sunak. And I think he's even worse than Johnson because at least with Johnson, you know, he's a charismatic, funny guy. With Sunak, he's like the equivalent of Starmer, you know. It's not gonna convince anyone. It's just making the Conservative Party worse and worse.
Yeah, well, that's the trouble. They're caught in a bubble, and it's not the people deciding. This is where they're going wrong, as they often do, the Tories. They're, you know, cutting off their nose to spite their face. And do they still not realise it? Are they that much in a bubble that they don't see what they're doing?
I think after, like, 10 years and 8-seat majority, they've not realised that to be a Conservative Party, you have to be Conservative. Like, there's a saying among young Conservatives, 80-seat majority, what have they actually done that's Conservative? If it was Labour, they'd implement loads of progressive policies, like Blair, for example, with the Communications Act, the Equalities Act, all these progressive policies that have impacted society for the worse, I'd argue, with diversity inclusion officers making the NHS and other issues, other industries, a bureaucracy, with the Gender Recognition Act, you know, threatening the safety of women's only spaces. Like, these are massive issues.
And the highest tax since the 70 years, the highest tax rate.
Yeah, exactly. They're not Conservative at all, whether that's socially or economically. It's ridiculous. And why would I, as someone who's socially and economically Conservative, why would I vote for them?
What is the snapshot of the Conservative Party? When you look at the last 5 here, they are from all stripes of the Tory party, and we know that it is a broad church, as the Labour Party is. And you might say that's probably a good thing in the sense that you keep all the nut jobs inside the 2 major parties and control them from a leadership. And yet, it's wide open. We don't know whether we're going to have a right-wing Prime Minister or someone who's a bit more woke, or you know, the state of the Tory party is really, really open to guesswork. It's a bit too broad, isn't it?
I don't think you could differentiate the Tories from the Labour Party at the moment.
Yeah.
Like, it's like Liz Truss, why is she, like, so happily to move from the Lib Dems to the Conservative Party? Like, surely there should be an ideological problem with that. But no, it just seems like the Tory party stands for anything nowadays.
They just stand for themselves. None of them actually have their own ideology, it doesn't seem.
It's not great. I've lost faith in politics and I'm only 19, so...
Oh, yeah.
Jess, I've got to ask you here. Now, there was a focus group about the Tory leadership in Rother Valley in Sheffield. There were 8 people involved, 5 women and 3 men, so it's not a huge amount, but they are from Yorkshire, and this is an area where the Red Wall came tumbling down. And key takeaways from this, mainly Conservative-inclined groups here, is that there is a fury about the economy, about the winter to come, and there is a short shrift for the culture war in that context. What's that got to do with me, they're saying in Rother Valley? The sole focus is their cost of living issues. They're desperate to hear about what policies to deal with. Now, here we are, constantly talking about woke issues and gender-only bogs and, you know, who's a man and everything. But actually, when you hand out to the public, there ain't no culture war, is there?
I mean, I agree that the cost of living crisis should be politicians' #1 priority, but I think the question of what is a woman is a good litmus test for who is an actual Conservative or not.
Right.
And I think quite good that like Penny Mordaunt got in trouble for that. I think it's the right finally standing for something, even if it is just a simple definition.
Yeah, at least they're saying something, you know. I mean, like when Boris was asked, he said, well, it's probably going to get me into trouble, but I think a woman is someone who's born female, and people respected that, whereas Keir Starmer goes, oh, you know, I don't want to answer that, and flannels around. It shows you the person, doesn't it?
Now, of course, 80 seats, that victory came courtesy of Sedgefield, of Bolsover, of Dudley. And the talk was that traditional Labour working-class voters had basically lent Boris their vote because he'd got Brexit done, and that whacking majority was the reason. However, Jess, the damage to the Tory brand, according to this focus group, as a result of the Johnson scandals, is real in Sheffield. Feeling was that Tory MPs had left it too long. As a result, the new Broom candidates went down best. OK, the new Brooms, the Tugendhats and Badenochs. Sunak's problem is real, both because voters in this group associate him mostly with Boris Johnson, but also of the economy. So in other words, giving away all that money over pandemic hasn't appeared to work for the people of Sheffield.
I think free market policies work best for the people, and the Conservative Party, again, have abandoned those policies. With raising taxes, with increasing the welfare state. These are real issues and they don't work for the people. And when you basically introduce Labour's economic plan, obviously that's not going to work because, again, Labour aren't known for their best handling of the economy. So I think the Conservatives need to stay true to their roots of Thatcherism, of free marketeering.
But Rishi was Chancellor, so he's the cause of all this, yet it's nothing to do with the people voting him, is it? It's all about this bubble one. You know, it's looking like he might win it.
I really hope he doesn't win it. Although, again, if we finally end this reign of Conservatives, then perhaps the Conservative Party will have to rethink what they stand for because, like you've said before, it's a mystery of what we stand for. I don't like the Cameron government, but they had to define what they stood for after a decade of Blair. Hopefully, if Labour gets in charge, maybe then it'll give the Conservatives a chance to consider what they stand for again.
So one of the backbenchers here, and she did have a ministerial job for a while, Kemi Badenoch, took her votes from 40 to 49. That's quite a lot from a standing start. The campaign say we're very happy with her. This campaign came from right at the beginning. This time last week, she hadn't even decided that she was running. And here is the critical question, right? She would harm the fight for racial equality, says a left-wing activist. But it's quite the opposite, isn't it? I mean, really, she would burst their bubble by telling the truth about race. That's what's so interesting about her.
I think the thing is the left don't really care about racism. It's like, have you seen the amount of racist attacks that many people who consider themselves left-wing have aimed towards Suella Braverman, Rishi Sunak, Priti Patel, Kemi Badenoch, all these people.
And Jews.
Yeah, exactly. They don't care.
Them and the British National Party were subject to the EHRC.
It's ridiculous.
That should never be forgotten.
Absolutely, I completely agree. But the thing is, they like to use this to make themselves feel better and to make them, to make the Tories look worse, when realistically it's just plain politics. It's to make the Tories sound bad, even when there's no truth behind that.
It's the other way around, if anything. I mean, if you look at the leadership contests, they're all from different races and spheres.
Yeah, absolutely. And the thing is, we don't celebrate diversity in of itself. We celebrate merit because that's how it should be.
Merit and diversity of opinion.
Yeah, exactly. And when you celebrate merit and diversity of opinion, you do get diversity because there are great people of loads of different backgrounds which can contribute to our society.
Jess, you're 19 years old and there's a lot of Tory activists. And it's quite comforting to hear that there is a movement of teenagers who are out there in a centre-right kind of way, because what we all hear in our age group is that you lot are a whole series of left-wingers. It's not true, is it, Jess? There's a bit of a fight back. There's a bit of a counter-intuition amongst those born in the 21st century. Is that a fair comment, Jess?
Yeah, absolutely. Like, a lot of people within my generation have grown up with the radical anti-police divisive assessment of Black Lives Matter. They've grown up with this awful leftism within schools, and they've rebelled against that. And I think even though they're not happy with the Conservative Party, they're still strongly conservative.